I was 65 when Marisol came through the side door with the agency folder tucked against her chest and the faint clink of keys on a blue carabiner. And if there's one truth I can say cleanly, it's this: she wasn't hired for love, not by me. Not by my wife, not by anyone who'd seen the dull film that had settled over the house after a year of slow forgetting and faster fatigue. She was hired to make order out of the stickiness that gathers when a man my age stops bending to reach the baseboards, and a woman like my wife, Lenore, decides her knees have already negotiated enough with Florida humidity. Our street backs the marsh off Lake Tarpon. Palmetto clumps and ibis that play at the edge of our yard like they own it. And the house is a low 1960s ranch that I've painted the same beige 3 times because it's the only color that forgives heat and dust. When the agency sent her, I expected the usual: someone who moves fast and talks faster. Someone who bangs the vacuum into chair legs and calls every framed face, sweetheart. Someone who leaves the lemon cleaner smell and not much else. Instead, Marisol studied the threshold as if asking permission from the wood. Then stepped in without putting on a performance. Eyes taking inventory of a life she wasn't allowed to have opinions on. She wore a dark cotton dress and white sneakers that had lost their brightness in a way that felt honest, a braid coiled low like a rope you could trust, and hands with the small nicks of a person who works without checking a clock. She set the folder on the kitchen counter, opened it to the first page with my name, Harlan Vickers, spelled correctly for once, and said, "Sir." "I'll start where you think it matters most. I don't like sir." I told her to call me Harlan. She nodded, and that was the end of the argument. Lenore stayed in the bedroom that first morning with one of her good days prompting her to reorganize pill bottles by color: pink for the small joys, white for the steady work of staying alive, blue for sleep, and she called out once to ask for iced tea with too much ice. And I brought it the way she likes, squeezing the lemon against the rim until it spurts. Marisol watched me do it and then looked away, but not from embarrassment. It was the look of someone cataloging a ritual she'd be expected to replicate without improvisation. I should say it outright because it's the simplest truth. I did not bring Marisol here to tempt myself. I brought her because the AC filter had sprouted fur and the laundry didn't make it past the guest room chair, and because I was tired of the sourness of a kitchen sponge that had done 2 wars and wanted a medal. You think at 65 you're proofed against the suddenness of wanting. You believe the embers that remain are for reheating coffee and not for building new fires. But wanting doesn't ask how old you are, it asks whether you're paying attention. The first hour she moved through the house without a soundtrack. No phone clipped to the waistband, no earbuds announcing a life elsewhere. She let the house talk. The floors complained under her. The pantry door stuck at the spot where humidity licks the paint. The dishwasher needed to be coaxed with a firm palm. And she learned the exact place to press faster than I had. She tied one of Lenore's aprons around her waist because I forgot to buy one. The yellow one with a faint grease blossom over the left pocket and a hem I'd repaired with a sloppy ladder stitch the week my grandson broke his wrist falling off the clubhouse ladder. Seeing Marisol knot that apron punched something soft in me I wasn't prepared to protect. She found the dust on the top shelf that even the step stool refused. The desiccated cicada shell behind the spider plant. And the letter I'd tucked into an old cookbook years ago. One I'd written to Lenore on our 30th anniversary and never gave. Not for any dramatic reason, just because the restaurant turned out too loud and the pie too Sweet, and by the time we got home, the words felt too polished for the quiet we were in. I watched Marisol read the first line without reading it, eyes moving over the envelope and then lifting to me with a question she didn't voice. Put that with the things that stay, I said, not meaning to sound like there was a system. She slid it into a drawer as if it was a small animal she promised to keep warm. It wasn't love then. It would be dishonest to pretend it was. It was attention, and attention is a dangerous animal at my age because you mistake it for rescue. She filled a bucket in the sink and I realized she would be the one to clean the porcelain everyone touches but no one claims. The basin where our hands hesitate before turning on the faucet. Your water pressure is good, she said. Someone took care of this house. I heard praise where none was offered. And I stood taller in a body that measures itself in careful increments now, stairs by the half flight, grocery bags by the quart, pride by the teaspoon. The agency gave her a key on a small blue tag with a number, not our address. And when she set the ring next to my wallet, it made a chiming sound that belonged to another life. Keys mean trust punished by convenience. Lenore emerged after noon to thank her and to give directions she didn't need. Dust the frames, not the glass. Leave the laundry detergent cap half full. Wipe the banister even though we never use it. My wife's voice has become more brittle when instructing. As if clarity could keep the wolves of confusion from the door. She clings to lists because they don't talk back. Marisol nodded. Of course, she said, and then did things no list would capture. Like wiping the thin lip under the stovetop that collects what you say you don't spill. Or turning the rug to even the sun. At some point the radio in the garage came on by itself the way it does when the timer shivers loose, and an old country song drifted in about a man missing something he never admitted owning. Marisol hummed, low and unshowy, and when she reached to pull the string on the blind, a sliver of afternoon fell across her forearm and lit up a tiny silver scar shaped like a comma. I found myself wanting to ask who or what had placed that pause in her skin. But I don't have rights to her stories. She finished the kitchen and asked if she should tackle the office. I almost told her to skip it. The office is the museum of my fussing. Ledger books even though I haven't run the tubing business in 9 years. Cigar boxes I've never put cigars in. A drawer full of screws with their threads married to nothing. She waited. In marriage you learn when to deflect, when to tell the truth. When to offer the partial one that keeps the day whole. Do the desk and the shelves, I said, which is like telling a pilot to tidy the cockpit. She entered that room the way people enter chapels they don't pray in. Taking off the apron because dust is not all the same. And I stood at the doorway feeling like a boy who'd tracked mud where his mother could see. She picked up the brass letter opener shaped like a feather and smiled at its pretension. She moved the pen cup and found the penny with the off-center stamp that my brother swore was worth something and isn't. On the second shelf she paused at the wedding photo. We were in St. Augustine, wind pushing Lenore's veil sideways so it looked like the sail of the boat in the distance wanted to claim her, and my hair still had ambition. Marisol didn't pretend not to see it. She cleaned the frame and then set the photo face down on the blotter to wipe under it. And the casualness of that gesture, my marriage flat to the desk for a full breath, made my ribs feel too crowded. You have a good face there, she said. A man who knew what he wanted. And now? I asked before reason registered that there was a trap in that question. She took longer than necessary to straighten the stack of envelopes, then said, "Now you know the cost of wanting." In Spanish, the word for cost and the word for value sit closer together than we keep them in English. I heard both in her mouth. We did not flirt. If you're looking for the cheap spark, the deliberate brush of hands, you won't find it here. But there was a current, and it traveled through the work. The way she opened a window I'd decided was jammed and let in a strip of honest air. The way she reached for the broom with the slow confidence of someone who doesn't apologize for doing a thing well. Around 3, thunder stacked itself over the lake and the air swelled. And Marisol asked whether she should close up or ride it out. I'll drive you, I said, too fast, then added, if it gets bad. She shook her head. I've walked through worse, and she had the kind of smile that tells the storm you've already met its older brother. She finished the office, returned the photo to its small command on the shelf, and went to the laundry where our clothes confessed what we do when no one's watching. My socks with the thin heel, Lenore's cardigan with a dab of jelly at the cuff, a towel that had learned the shape of a shoulder. In the late afternoon, Lenore dozed in her chair with a book splayed like a gull wing on her lap, and I brewed tea the way my mother did when clouds muscled the sky, black, strong, an orange slice floating like a buoy. Marisol took her cup without sugar. It tastes like something real, she said. And for a second I felt I'd given her more than hot water and leaves. When the storm finally released what it had carried all day, the gutters sang and the eaves dripped and the floor under the back door went slick. She laid an old towel there without making a note of it on any list. And then she looked at my hands. These nails, she said, not unkindly, you've been working. I almost said, once, as if labor leaves you forever marked, but instead I said, rust on the mower, and she nodded as if that explains a man's entire life. Before she left, she took the blue tag key off the ring and threaded it onto a thin black cord. She tied in a neat loop. I don't like jangling, she said, and slipped it under the apron knot. Then untied the apron and folded it as careful as if it were her own shirt. She left it at the end of the counter, but where she placed it changed the kitchen's geometry. The apron had lived crumpled on a hook, a domestic flag that meant we were still trying. In its neatness I saw a challenge. Be worthy of the order you claim you want. She scribbled the day's notes in a small square notebook the agency gave her. Hands cramped from writing what her mouth didn't need to say. Done, done, done. Next time, windows, she said. It will feel like a different house. Lenore woke enough to say, Thursday is better for us, and Marisol wrote Thursday. On her way out she hesitated by the entry table, where we keep the bowl of mail we promised to sort and never do, and touched the chip in the ceramic rim with her thumb. My grandmother had this pattern, she said. She called it poor people fancy. She smiled once more and then stepped into air that smelled like wet pennies. I watched the blue cord disappear under her collarbone when she reached to fix her braid. The key lay there like a secret pressed against skin. It is the easiest thing to lie to yourself about the direction of a story. To say it is only about cleaning, only about Thursday, only about the relief of a floor that doesn't argue with your feet. But that afternoon after she left, the quiet felt rearranged. The house wasn't just clean, it had been witnessed. There is risk in being seen at 65 when you have spent years practicing the art of taking up less space. You start to believe that quiet equals safety. That dust is a proof of loyalty. I sat at the kitchen table and tried to read the weather map on the phone like an oracle. But every swirl said the same thing, more of it. Lenore asked from the doorway, do you like her? And I said, she's competent, the word men use when they are trying to protect a thing by draining it of heat. Good, my wife said. And for a moment her face softened into the woman who used to dance with me in sock feet while the meatloaf cooled before sleep and pain formed their union. Later, when I took the trash out, the marsh was loud with frogs made brave by rain. And I saw a peach-colored napkin snagged under the oleander. An old party remnant from a life that still thinks it is happening. I went to pick it up and found that it wasn't a napkin at all but a corner of a net I hadn't seen before, a torn square meant to catch the things that float just out of reach. I don't know whose it is or how it came to rest in my shrubs, but I pocketed it. A man with a piece of mesh that might someday be useful. And walked back to a kitchen where a folded yellow apron waited like a small bright promise and a key had already begun to warm the skin of someone who was not hired to hold my heart. On Thursday she came back, not with fanfare but with the same dark dress and sneakers. Braid fixed tighter this time as if she had decided not to let a single strand get in the way of the work, and maybe that detail should not have mattered to me, but it did. Because I'd been waiting all morning in a way I hadn't waited for anyone in years. Shuffling the mail into smaller stacks so it looked like I had purpose. Lenore was sharper that day, her questions quick, her instructions too precise. And Marisol listened with the kind of patience I couldn't summon anymore. Nodding as my wife told her where to find the silver polish and how not to scrub the china pattern off the plates. When Lenore retreated to the den with her crossword, I found myself following Marisol into the living room under the pretense of checking the ball game score on TV. She moved the furniture in deliberate inches, like a woman who respects weight and history, and when she reached for the curtains, light bled across her face in stripes. I asked if she needed help lifting the coffee table, and she shook her head. I've moved worse, she said. Her arms tensed against the wood. And I caught myself looking longer than I should. In the silence that followed, I realized I could hear my own heartbeat. Not strong like it used to be but stubborn, tapping out a reminder that it was still working. Later, in the kitchen, she found the jar of coins I had been throwing quarters into for years. And she lifted it with a small grunt, setting it aside so she could wipe the counter. Saving for something? She asked. I almost said, no, but the question cracked something. Used to be for vacations, I admitted. Now I don't know. Habit, I guess. She looked at me in a way that wasn't pity, more like recognition. As though she understood that sometimes a man keeps collecting for a future he already suspects won't come. Outside, thunder muttered again. Marisol turned to the window, then back to me. These storms, she said softly, they don't wait for anyone. And in her voice, I heard both a warning and an invitation I wasn't ready to name.